What do you think, Kara? Better?
No comment.
So you're not gonna comment. Not gonna comment on the music at all anymore.
No. Because I was just saying before stream started, I was just like, because every time it lands on YouTube now, I sound like a fool. So the music is great. It matches our vibe. It matches everything about us. It's perfect in all ways, shapes, and forms.
Didn't fall for my little probe there. My little jest.
Well, this time I did switch the music, so it's a little bit more of like a soft jazz porn music. So I felt that was a little more appropriate for the theme.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
My mind went to.
I mean, it's the topic of love tonight. So
Yeah, baby. Welcome
love.
to LessThan3NPC, a little talk show where me and Kara and Joe talk about things that are too serious to talk about while playing video games. And tonight, talking about love, baby.
Mhm.
Talking about love.
But you have to say it like that the whole night. I already
Love.
prerequisite. It's gonna be like, is love.
It's love. We
We're
got to
talking about love. Happy Valentine's if you celebrate Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just another day.
Yep.
But it's all good. But we're gonna talk about love.
We're
Mhm.
talking about love. Oh, how was do you guys do anything for Valentine's Day? Did you do like a friendship Valentine's
No.
Day thing?
I cleaned my
No.
whole house today.
Oh, that's nice.
So I was like,
That's self-love.
Went to the pool.
self-love.
Yeah.
Was it though? I don't know. It was very strenuous.
Decluttering. Decluttering is an act of self-love.
Mm,
Yeah, I think so. Taking care of your space, taking care of your,
Yeah.
you know, your mental.
I went to the pool, though I did hear over here an older gentleman. He was asked if he was doing anything special, and he laughed and said, "No, we have leftovers for tonight." Um, so I guess the
Nice.
romance leaves people at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
And
What's the most, I don't want to say like extravagant, but what's a memory from Valentine's Day that you've all had?
Probably my favorite Valentine's Day was actually in high school, my freshman year, because me and all of my friends were single, and we were like boy crazed at the time, and like really sad and upset that none of us had dates for Valentine's Day because that's a thing that society puts on you even when you're a fucking teenager. So I decided we were gonna have an anti-Valentine's Day party, and I went to the store and I bought black roses, and I gave them to all my friends, and we had a sleepover, and we watched scary movies all night.
Oh, nice. That's fun.
Like where the couples always die, and
so really cathartic then.
cathartic. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was probably my favorite Valentine's Day, and I think we did that for like 2 or 3 years after that. That was fun.
Sounds like a pretty
Nice.
sweet tradition.
Yeah, because we just
Yeah.
wanted to celebrate being with each other, and
Mhm.
fuck whatever society tells you about being in a relationship.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty solid. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. What about you, Joe?
Maybe this is just a comment on my ADHD mind, but I don't actually remember many of my Valentine's Day excursions, which is probably really bad. Yeah,
It is sort of just a random day in February.
It's a very, I think when I was in a relationship, there was an effort to remember the day and stuff like that and do something for it, but yeah, I'm drawing a blank right now. I'm drawing a blank. But I think moving forward, if I was in a relationship, I'd approach it a lot differently. But at the same time, I don't know. It feels weird to have one day allocated for this. Like one day where you're supposed to go above and beyond the normal things, right? Like that kind of gesture or affection is something I'd want to do on a regular basis. Like you see a weird food at the grocery store, so you buy it for your partner, right? Like this reminded me of you,
But it's weird cantaloupe, and it reminded me of you, so I bought it.
Yeah, it's like on a random Tuesday sometime,
Yeah, I do. My current partner and I do a lot of that, like sort of random gift giving, or like random, like, oh, we're just gonna do a night to ourselves and turn off our phones and do whatever. So it's not so everything's not so hinged on like what are we doing for Valentine's Day. Like we got together yesterday because yesterday was the only day our schedules aligned because she works like crazy and I work like crazy and I'm trying to prep for this trip and it's a whole thing. So it just ended up being the day before Valentine's Day and I was like, "Do we want to do anything for Valentine's Day?" She was like, "No, not really. I mean, if you want to come over and like help me make cookies cuz I'm making cookies for the residents cuz she works in an old folks home."
Yeah.
And so I helped her bake heart-shaped cookies for her and the old folks to decorate today as part of one of their activities.
Oh, fun.
Aw,
Yeah, I
that's
got to eat
fun.
all the burnt ones.
Burnt
Well, okay, she's got very high standards for what a
Oh, I
burnt
see.
cookie is. So it's like
Okay.
just slightly brown, it's burnt,
Yeah.
and it's unacceptable. So it's like,
So she's a
In my
serious baker who
brain,
knows what she's doing then.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, all I could think of about is like solid acid reflex because
oh
just like
no, no,
burnt
no, no, no,
cookies.
no. They were just like slightly more brown than usual.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay. Still edible
Still
Yeah.
edible.
and enjoyable. Okay.
Still more than edible. Like
Yeah.
even I'll power through a little bit of actual like chard
Yeah.
on some cookies.
For as
Yeah.
long as it's a good cookie, like if it's not a good cookie, then it's not worth it. But if it's a
Yeah.
good cookie,
Especially if it's like gingerbread or something like that, I'll stomach a little bit of burntness.
I will not. But anyway, that's something else.
Kara's like, I've got high standards for cookies.
I have my own standards for cookies, and that's why I usually bake my own cookies. I don't think I've bought a cookie from like a grocery store. I've definitely bought cookies from like a fast food place. But anyway, sorry, we don't need to go on a discourse about cookies. Talking about love,
We're talking about
love,
love today.
talking
Yeah,
about
we tricked all
love.
you. This is a cookie discussion.
This is actually
today.
a cookie
We're actually
discussion.
talking about cookies
Yeah.
today.
Psych.
So yes, and yes, CJ, we can see you. So love. It's a score of 0 in tennis and other things.
It is a chemical makeup in our brains. It's not real. Everyone is getting lied to. It's fake. We should all just live a miserable life without love.
I can see we're
Love.
gonna be once again on opposite sides of this conversation. Kara.
Someone's got to carry that end of the conversation, though. I think it's,
As
it's
someone who
admirable.
is
It's admirable
cool
for
and
Kara
not
to pick up that end.
What is love? You know, it's fine.
What is love?
Well, should we start that? Should that be our first question? What is a love?
I mean, it's kind of a complicated thing because it
Mhm.
means something different to every person. Like, for me, love is more akin to safety. Like, I don't like because you can kind of get like that initial like for me, I can kind of get that initial spark with like anybody who I think is attractive and who thinks that I'm attractive, but I don't consider that love. Like that's sort of just like, oh hey, chemicals are going off because you know my brain thinks you look good, and but like love is something that's like consistent and safe and chill and usually not exciting
Mhm.
because exciting is stressful.
I guess so. Joe?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I remember in the bits and pieces that still remain within my brain when I was studying Buddhism in university. I remember stumbling across a quote. I think it was from Dalai Lama talking about um, how if your like heart flutters and your palms get sweaty and all that kind of stuff, um, that's generally not a good sign. As far as like Buddhism is concerned, love, true love, whatever, is more about, like you say, more about safety and comfortability. So that when you find that other person, you're actually calmer around them. You're actually more relaxed around them. You're actually more yourself around them. It's a very Buddhist way of looking at a concept that is very charged, I think,
Hmm.
in a lot of other literature and a lot of other cultural contexts. But that's just interesting that you say that because I think that definitely not out of left field there with what is love.
I was
I
a
mean,
secret Buddhist. Who knew?
in terms of
wait, what?
myself, I don't know. I don't think I don't think I can put a specific concept around it. I think in some ways it's very similar to what Des was saying about it. Um, to me, love in a romantic context, well, I guess like even not just in romantic, but even like a friendship context, um, there's love when I can be myself and I'm not putting extra effort into performing a certain way, you know. um, that's when I feel the presence of love. um, Whether it's expressed or not, I think is another thing. We did our love language thing as homework for this, and words of affirmation got 0% for me. So I don't necessarily need to say it or to hear it from people, but I feel love um, differently. So it's harder to pin down with words for me.
Yeah.
But Kara, what about you? Talking chemical,
Oh.
it's only chemicals in the brain.
I was being
Let's
facetious. It's
expand on
fine.
that, please.
Not,
A thing that can be induced by peas or chocolate.
yeah, basically. I love chocolate. Um, no, I think for me, there's a very much a very similar thread that's coming from the both of you as well. It's like love. I feel love when I feel safe, and that's obviously a experience of trust that's built over time.
Hmm.
So for me, love, and we're going to talk about this too. There's another question about love versus infatuation later on, but for me, it's like it's that concept of I feel safe in this environment. This person or people around me understand a component of how I am and how I operate as a person, and because of that, there's a balance in the space,
Hmm.
right? And love is something that like it doesn't have to just be like you said words or whatever it might be, but it's also like a feeling that you have inside, right? It's like, do I think about this person when they're not around, you know? Do I actively go out of my way to do something for them if they ask me to? You know, or is it one of those things where you get emotional, right, when certain components of that person's life is affected either in a positive or a negative way, right? Like you want to be there to support that person,
Hmm.
right? So I think it's all these collective experiences that can create the bubble or the umbrella of love,
Hmm.
right? I don't think love is this like one emotion. I don't think
Yeah.
it's just like this streamlined thing.
Yeah.
Which, and I could be wrong because I can't remember if it's Greek or Roman, but there's I can't remember if it's Greek or Roman, but there are in either of those cultures, I can't remember, in either of those languages, there are different words for different types of love. There's like familial love, there's like romantic love,
Mm,
there's like love Greek. Thank you, Xandra. Um, there's like different levels, so it's not all just all encompassed under one love umbrella. It's different kinds of
right.
love as
Hmm.
they apply to different kinds of relationships, which I think honestly is
Totally.
more accurate. Um, because the way I would say I love you to my dad is not the same way that I would say I love you to my partner.
Hmm.
Correct.
Yeah. And I think from that, I guess, realm of the world too, there's also platonic love,
Mhm.
and and that comes out of, I think, Plato. I think people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember he's talking about it was a post on this Facebook group I follow, just polyamory Facebook group, and they had a whole article talking about how platonic love doesn't get its due, and they
Yeah.
were kind of tracking and tracing it back to that era where the philosophers at the time were talking about the fact that like platonic love is actually sort of meant to be more ideal because it's less fraught with chaotic emotions, because they very much saw like romantic love as being very well chaotic and very messy and very all over the place, whereas
Fire and
platonic love,
sparks and
yeah, whereas platonic love was very much more measured and something you can rely on and depend upon and all that stuff. And somewhere along the line, as society developed, the romantic love got blown way out of proportion and platonic love got sort of sidestepped, which is really weird when you think about the rise of Christianity and how they kind of took over everything. But that's
well,
different.
no, that makes perfect sense to me because platonic love doesn't serve a like doesn't serve a purpose in society in the same way that romantic love does, because you have to have some sort of thing that keeps you married to the person that you society has said that you are going to stay married to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like it works along the like the marriage industrial complex, sort of like, oh, we're going to romanticize this one particular thing, and
Mm-hmm.
once you've decided that you feel this emotion, then you know you need to make the next steps, and then you need to get married and you need to have babies, and like,
Yeah.
because
Yes,
people
God must watch you conceive those babies.
God's a voyeur.
not not if you're Mormon. Gotta do it under them covers.
I'll do them under them covers.
Yeah.
It's the episode of love. Sorry, I
Um,
derailed there. My mistake.
no, but I think so. It makes more sense that we would, as a society, romanticize romantic love as opposed to romanticizing platonic love, because platonic love, when you have platonic love and you have a group of people that support you and you feel platonic love for, then you feel less needy to get those emotions from another person
Mm-hmm.
in a very
Mm-hmm.
specific way. Like
Yeah.
you settle less because you already get that emotional fulfillment from the people in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about poly. Going back to that poly combo.
That's a
Yeah. But I mean, even if you look at sort of some of the gripes that we've seen from the Catholic Church, like even very recently, I think the Pope was whining about um, millennials not having as many children and the population decline, and it's an affront to God that people are not having kids and getting married and stuff like that. And I'm totally over exaggerating, but it was along that vein. And I just it's mind boggling to me that and this speaks to myself as a demisexual person, I suppose, but it's mind boggling to me that people can look at people not being married and not having kids as like a crisis. Like
Mm.
there's several billion people on the planet. We can go a couple of generations without people procreating and we'll be just fine, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, but the Pope's incentive is to make more Catholics.
Yeah.
No, I
So
know. I know what he's all about. I know his MO.
he's like, these dogs and cats you name your children cannot make more Catholic cats and dogs. So they are not financially adding to the system. So it's frustrating for them, no doubt.
Yeah.
You don't know what religion my dog is.
Moose. Moose.
Listen,
What
Care to comment,
did
Moose?
you lie
Please
with?
comment.
are you a Catholic? No,
Are
he's
you
not
Catholic,
a
Moose?
Catholic. Satanist.
Can we say that all cats are atheists? Is that
Yes.
Oh,
Of
yeah.
course they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
No, all cats are their own gods.
Well,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true. That's true.
all I can think about is that meme now with that cat on the top of a power pole, and it's just like, I see no gods except me. Like that's 100% cats. Cats love themselves. It's great.
Yeah.
Cats are self-deists.
Yes.
Self-deist.
100% health.
Well, I mean, they had a whole civilization convinced of it
Yeah.
several,
Oh, yeah.
1,000 years ago, right? So
Oh, I'm convinced.
Yeah.
When
I
I
mean,
build
yeah,
my
there's
shrine, you will
giant
all witness
stone
my.
statues of the cats. So
I love cats. I say that like in the context of love.
Because you can, like, I really, really value the different kinds of love that I have in my life, because
mhm.
like I spent a lot of time searching, like, doing the whole, compet thing where it was like I was searching for a very specific type of love with a very specific type of person. And coming from a home in which love was taught to me in an unhealthy way, um, I had decided that people loved me regardless of how they treated me, because the people who were supposed to love me treated me poorly. And I was like, oh, that's
Mm,
love. Like, that's fine. That's love. Which led to a lot of really awful abusive relationships because I had a distorted view of what love actually meant.
yeah.
So our parents kind of, and like the people in our lives when we're little, I won't just limit it to parents, but the people in our lives when we're little really draw us that love map for the rest of our lives. And it kind of tells us what kind of relationships we're going to pursue as we get older.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and the whole concept of love is all you need, I think, is very toxic in that respect because so long as the person loves you, we can justify a whole litany of behavior, right?
Yeah.
Because if at the end of the day they love you, they're really just, you know, bad at expressing that love, or there's lots of excuses that we can come up with.
This is just how they tell you they love you.
Yeah, they just love you so much, you know. I it comes up a lot, and it's a tricky topic to navigate when we talk about family violence, domestic violence stuff, and sexual violence, you know, adjacent to that too, um, because I think people can still love people that are hurting them. They just they love the person, but not the behavior, right?
Yep.
So we don't want to stray into that. Why do they stay if this person's so bad to them, kind of thing? Because that's a whole other topic. Um, but I think again, there are a lot of ways in which love is misused and actively used to abuse another individual, right?
Yep.
I'm doing this because I love you. I'm tracking your phone because I love you. I'm hacking your email because I love you, right? Not love.
No.
Mm-hmm.
People that love each other don't hack each other's emails, you know?
Yeah. Or
Well, and
punch the bag boy at the grocery store for looking at you twice.
Yeah, right.
but that's the thing, right? It's what we're talking about is how the emphasis on the word specifically love, right, has really kind of transformed the interpretation of what people kind of perceive what the interaction of love is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yeah, I think there's a lot that can be said about, you know, how we grow up and the experiences that we're shown about what quote unquote love is, because it's either told to us that way, or there's also the opposite of it, which is the absence of that reflection, right? So it's kind of when you sit there and you go, kind of like what Des was saying, is just like there could be a lack of love, and that is then internalized and translated into thinking that that's what love is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the definition of what that is for that person. And then when you kind of grow up and you go out into the world and you start giving, you know, getting different experiences, and that's where you start seeing different behaviors put in place, and how do you navigate that,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because
right?
if you're not given any love at all or taught really what healthy love looks like, then you can end up in a situation where you're walking out into the world and the first person that smiles and says hello at you is all of a sudden in love with you because you think that
Mm-hmm.
that's what that is. Because
Yeah.
it's the only positive interaction you've had with another human.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. I think even just thinking about my own upbringing too, like again, I felt loved by my parents, but I think there was some misalignment in terms of like what I was actually needing. And I'm thinking like the term connection is like really popping in my brain right now. Um, and I don't know whether it's love we're seeking or connection, right? I'm just throwing that out there, like whether that's what people think about that. But um, I was seeking a connection that I was not getting in my when I was growing up and stuff like that. Um, and so it skewed things so that when I did receive certain attention or certain interactions, I think I read too much into them, right? And again, I think there's elements of neurodivergence here where that stuff's hard to figure out already, but you have all these other external influences telling you, oh, that person likes you, oh, that person likes you because they did this, right? It's like, well, maybe they were just being nice. Maybe a nice person is just a nice person, right? And they don't actually love you. So it gets really messy really fast because it intersects with all these problematic gender scripts that we've kind of touched on in
I feel
other
that so hard,
shows.
Joe. I feel that so hard. Because, like, I was, you know, a feminine person in a nerd community as a teenager with a bunch of teenage boys who weren't taught how to interact with women, who weren't taught what love really was, or like what affection or um, what romance looked like, except for what was happening in movies or what like their
Hmm.
parents were telling them. And like, so any sort of positive thing from me as a female was like, she's in love with me.
Mm.
I love her.
Yep.
I have gotten a positive thing, and now we are in love, and we will be in love forever. Like, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
Run away.
Well,
I
I mean,
was
That's
just
my
happy.
brain does.
I was just happy to see you because I haven't seen you in 6 months. It's not a. You don't have to read into it. It's fine.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that was one of the things that I had to. One of the first things I had to unlearn as a reformed and nice guy TM was that that kind of interaction. It's just a pleasant interaction. It's just somebody being nice for their own sake, right? Because people generally don't want to be assholes to each other, and people are happy to have friends, right? So that positive interaction, um, you can't be reading any more into it than it is. If it's a positive interaction, that's great. It means they like having you around, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really all you can draw from that, right? It doesn't mean that they're in love with you or they want this or that from you.
Yeah. I feel like I've been on both sides of that. Whereas, like, I was sending out clear friendship vibes and was like, "Hey, I'm excited to see you. This is fine." And then they saw
Mm-hmm.
that as like, "We're in love." And then, the opposite thing where it was like they were sending out clear friendship vibes, and I was like, "But what does it mean?" I mean, especially as a gay person, that's a hard thing to navigate because it's
Mm.
like, is it just friendship vibes or is it gay vibes? Are you being nice to me or are you being gay at me? I need to know.
Oh no. That's a cycle of doom to try and navigate. Holy shit. Oh no.
Baby gay, that's a
Yeah,
thing.
oh for sure. Yeah. I mean, they're not just, sorry to divert a little bit into that world. Like the interpretation of queer love as well is very, very different from the standardized roles, right? That most of society is kind of given because again, it's changing, obviously. Like you hear about kids today who are just like openly dating in junior high and high school to their partners. And you're sitting there and you're going like, well, shit, growing up in the 90s and the aughts, that wasn't a thing, you know, like that really wasn't a thing still. So it's interesting to see that happening more and more. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty proud of all those guys. Um, what was I gonna say though? Shit.
What were you gonna say?
What was I gonna
Something about
say?
queer relationships.
No, before that. Oh, sorry. The interpretation of love. Is this friendship vibes or is this love vibes or like how
Yeah.
I have made it a policy in my life now where I'm just like have the courage to just say what it is, right? And I know that's like super hard and not every scenario is capable of doing that, but it is an interesting thing where if you are able to apply it and you're just like I love you in a friendship way, right? And just stating it with those components together
Mhm.
instead of it being like I love you in a romantic way, and having those very clear lines kind of I think allows people to process stuff a little
Yeah.
bit. um Obviously not very easy to do when the emotion balls are like running around amok on the inside. But it's I think it should be more of a policy that we as a society encourage people not only to be able to say these things, but when it's received, it's also reflected correctly. Like, I don't know how many times we've heard about, women saying no at bars and then the guys getting violent about it, right? Like, it's the same, it's not to that extent, but it's just saying, like, I'm expressing to you how I feel about you, then receiving it and being like, okay, I might have to walk away and process this for a bit and come back.
Mm-hmm.
But depending on the answer for it. But I feel like I don't like how a lot of the romanticized versions of love is like this whole thing where women are supposed to be, silent and quiet and waiting on the sidelines for
Pursued.
their pursued. Yes, pursued is a good way to putting it. And then they come across the men who are just like I just need to go get it, right? And you're just like this is, I mean, it is what it is. Like you're not going to stop that behavior completely cuz people are just going to do that. But at the same time I'm just like there's such a better way to communicate, but
Yeah, but people are inherently just so afraid of rejection because we like 'cause, again, it's not like a thing that anybody teaches you to be good at. Is like because
No.
people put so like such high stakes on everything, especially as a kid. Like talking about getting rejected from colleges, going to high school or whatever. Like that seems like the most important thing in your life, and those rejections can mean such heavy things. And each rejection, as a kid, like the less you experience them, means so much more.
Mm.
And like
Mhm.
if you're not used to having that type of rejection, then you're going to be afraid to say your feelings.
Mhm.
um that's why I feel like it's sort of a trope of guys to be like, oh, just shoot your shot, like it's fine, because they're like constantly used to rejection because they're enabled by society to shoot their shot because they're not told to be pursued. They're
Right.
told to be the
Mhm.
pursuers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sometimes pretty hard for people who grow up at like socialized as women to get that sort of rejection because they're just not used to it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Just
totally.
that's why you'll have those women who are heartbroken over one guy who treated them not great, and like who they probably wanted to break up with in the first place, but because the other guy, or because the guy broke up with them first, all of a sudden it's like, that was my self-worth and I didn't realize it.
Mhm.
Everything's
Mhm.
terrible.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love fembots asking someone, do you like me in a pants on or pants off way?
I mean, I think you
I do
can
like
love
that too. That would
someone
be
in
much more
a.
clear. Much more clear than do you like me or do you like me? You know?
Do you like
You
me?
can
Check
like
yes or
someone with
no.
pants on. Thank you. You don't need to have pants
No, I
off
think
to
those
like
What's
things are
hilarious?
someone.
What's hilarious is I had the total opposite reaction. I was like, you could be friends with someone with their pants off. I don't.
Again, Des and I, we meet in the middle.
I've done things with lots of my friends, and I love them, but like in a friendship way.
Right. But I see them with their pants off all the time. So
All
there
time.
you go.
But that's another thing, is that sex for lots of people very often is the thing that tips the scale from like being in a relationship or dating to love. Is
Mm.
like
Well, that was
we
one
have
of the questions we
we
have
have
here.
done the orgasms together and now we are in love.
Right.
Mhm.
So again, it's having the conversation of
Or at
can
least
you
one of
not
them has.
actually love someone unless you fucked?
I think
Well,
so.
yeah.
Because that's what the epitome, like the top of the pyramid is in terms
That's
of
the
what love is.
escalator.
That's the escalator. Sometimes it's not an escalator. Some women get the very short end of that stick, and that's unfortunate. But
That's
anyway,
unfortunate.
the point being is that you're trying. Oh my god, I didn't mean that literally. I meant that like a lot of women don't have orgasms. Okay, sorry. Coming back to what I'm talking about. Um, uh, it's like how in a society where sex is kind of paramount in terms of like you love someone if you get into bed with them, right? And there's sexual connection in some way or another, and then you're kind of verifying like that is how we have consummated this romantic relationship is through sex. And
Thriller.
some people like that's des
Consummated.
fuck
I
off.
hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I don't like it.
There's Catholic upbringing coming through
Yep,
here.
yep.
No, that's why I hate it.
I have no answer for you. Um, but it's just when you sit there and you look at it and you're like, but is that actually what love is though? Is it separate? Is sexual activity, is that actually love? Is that how people see love? Or is it the fact that there's a connection between people that's seen as love? What are your opinions? And we'll come back around to that.
I'll just right off the bat here say that the idea that sex is love is fucked. It that's so problematic to sit there and then to say that like love exists without sex. It's the idea of a solid um, box that we have to decide on. that's the problem with this conversation. I think it's going to be different for different folks. And I think the minute we start saying that it has to be one thing or another to be legit is where we get tripped up. Because for a lot of people, sex is how love is expressed, right? For a lot of people, love is expressed without sex, right? I think again, you go back to platonic love. There's lots of ways that family and friends show love, um, more so for friends that show love without sex, right? Um, so this idea that like there's a concrete way to pin sex and love down, I think is problematic because
Yeah.
you can have sex without love and you can have love without sex and you can have love with sex, right? And but it can all change based on the people, based on the situation, based on the day, like it's not
Context
something
is
to be pinned
everything.
down. Yeah.
Mhm. So I guess more into that line then is why are we obsessed with making sex the representation of love? Why do we think that is? We see it in everything that we consume in media, how people, kind of like present themselves online. What do you think?
Because of a toxic implementation of the Catholic Church, saying like when you pair sex with love, you only fuck the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with, right?
Yeah. That's the
Anything
aka
outside
thing.
of that is wrong. And Christianity is so embedded in our culture that it's just gotten into literally every piece of media that we have. Every
Also,
movie, TV show, video game, whatever happens, it's in there.
yeah. And there's also this thing of like the sort of denouncement of pleasure in our
Mm,
in our culture, and that like doing things that are pleasurable is sort of a taboo, like sex is sort of a taboo, and like love feels like a sort of arbitrary barrier with which to keep people from pursuing their own pleasure. Because
mm,
if you just let people pursue their own pleasures, then they're not hindered by any systems. Then they don't have to, they don't, if we didn't have systems that hindered us, we would all just pursue our own pleasures. We'd all make, you know, documentaries all day long, or we would make music, or we would do whatever. We would be intellect whatever. Like if we just pursued our own pleasures and didn't have capitalism, um then like capitalism would work. Like if we were
mhm,
just allowed to just pursue what we wanted all the time. So that's just one extra thing, is sex equals pleasure, but if you don't create arbitrary rules around pursuing that pleasure, then it's a much more dangerous thing to the way that society decides that
mhm.
it is.
Yeah. Well, and just think about the stigmatization that masturbation has, right?
Yeah.
Masturbation is self love, self pleasure, and it's demonized in so many, or stigmatized. It's demonized in certain contexts and stigmatized in others. Even in a secular context, masturbation is seen as this like pathetic thing that you do because you can't get with somebody, you know? But there's a lot of power and self knowledge that can come from knowing your own body, right? And exploring what gives you pleasure, you know? And in terms of, not to get too like educator here, but like in terms of like making consent conversations a lot easier and making conversations around sexual activity easier, knowing what you like goes a long way to, helping explain that to a person, right?
Mhm.
Knowing what you like, why you like it, and what that's about means that you're less worried or less uncomfortable about talking to your partner about what you like, you know? But we're growing up in a pleasure starved culture in a lot of ways. It's maybe not starved, but pleasure stigmatized culture for sure.
Yeah. It's just an arbitrary checkbox that you have to. It's like, do you love this person? Okay, I guess you're allowed to have sex with them. But
Hmm.
if you don't love this person and you have sex with them, oh no no,
Yeah, you're bad. Don't do
you a
that.
slut.
Yeah, and again, let's be very clear that that's a double standard as far as like the gender binary is concerned. Because when we look at the gender binary, only one side of that binary gets called a slut for engaging in sex for pleasure. You know, but
CJ, you may ask a question. You just like keep it succinct. Love.
Kara, what are your thoughts? What are your
Huh?
thoughts?
About
Do you have-
what?
But
well,
why
sex,
love is an
pleasure.
arbitrary measure?
Yeah.
I think people like to over dramatize life a little bit. And that's what you perceive in a lot of media.
What?
So I know.
Sorry.
No, but it's just like, I think it's that realization that love can kind of blindside a few people because it's not seen the way that it's in, the poet's version of a book or in a movie or in a song or any of these things, because we're kind of inundated with that messaging a lot more in our day-to-day lives than we are typically with the potential partnerships that we could have. So it's kind of like, this is going to sound so terrible because I'm still trying to figure this out for myself, but it's like, for me, I just want love to be simple. Right? Like I want it to be the most simple thing on the planet, where it's just like, a partner who also feels the same way that I feel after I've described how I feel about them. And oh, Moose.
Moose, he got up. Now he's leaving us. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, bye. And it's just kind of navigating the realization that, again, it comes back to the definition of like how I perceive love is like, love is comfort, love is safety, love is, I don't get up in like a tense social ball when I'm around them, right?
Mhm.
Like, to me, that's the signifier of love. And that's what happens. They're kind of like revelations a little bit in my life, is just like, for instance, like Joe, when we went to Japan and then we came back and we started living together, there was this transition of time where I was just like, oh, I'm not nervous to be around Joe anymore.
Mhm.
And it's not like giggle nerves. Like, it was just,
Sorry, do that again?
no, I don't.
We can clip that. Don't worry.
Oh fuck. Anyway, but it was this thing where, like, I had never shared my life in any way with someone who wasn't my parents, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And at that time, like, it would be these fairly large chunks. It'd be like kind of 6 months, a year and a half, where I'd slowly start realizing like the comfort level that I had around you was this development of love, because it
Mhm.
was the building of trust, the building of
Yeah.
understanding, going through some tough stuff together, having conversations that I've never had before, you know. Same thing, Des, is like when we were shooting the documentary, like it was a progressive thing. Like there would be more conversations about stuff. So for me, the interpretation of like like, don't get me wrong, I like fucking love writing poetry, but it's not real. you know, like it's, and I don't mean that in, you shouldn't be kind of over the top with poetry and music and movies and all these things, that they're great, but I do think the conversation needs to come back at us as humans and say, these things might not be realistic, right? Someone doing these grand gestures might not be realistic. You might not notice it, but sometimes it's the subtle things that actually prove a lot of what love is.
Mhm.
um because I think what the interpretation is like, people can develop these really intense fantasies about what love is and then apply it to the people around them.
Yeah.
And it's not fair to anyone in that situation, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just a development of expectations, and no one can kind of live up to a Disney storyline or whatever, right? Like, I remember this specifically in high school. One of my guy friends, he basically went off on this huge rant. It's kind of a rant about describing his perfect girlfriend. And I was like, oh, Cinderella. Like, you literally just described Cinderella. And he's like, no, I didn't. I was like, yes, you just
No, I
described a
didn't. She's a
Disney princess.
brunette. My perfect girl's a brunette.
But it was that expectation that had already been like preloaded into his brain of like, this is who my girlfriend will be.
Mhm.
And you're sitting there and you go, and he's like, but that's love. Like, I love that I'm gonna love her because she's like that. And I'm like, dude, that that woman is, it's fictional. Like, that's not a real
Fantasy.
person. Like, dude, no. Like,
It's a
even
fantasy, my dude.
real royalty in the world is not like that. Like, it's so far beyond how to, I think, engage with love.
Right.
Mhm.
And I wish people were a little more receptive to realizing, like, have your fantasies, go do what you will, but understand there's such a wide gamut of expressions of love,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and you have to be kind of attuned to be able to see them or know what they are.
Yeah. I don't think your like desire for love to be simple is a totally unrealistic one, because I think you have to isolate love as a feeling and relationships as a thing, as like an
Mhm.
action. That is
Yeah.
like an active thing. Love is like a feeling that happens when the conditions are right in the relationship. Like, the relationship is the garden you tend, and, watering the flowers and
Mm.
having those conversations and
Mhm.
having that communication and making sure that that garden is good, and the flower that comes from it is love.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Whatever kind of flower that is, whatever kind of love that is. And then you decide whether or not you pick that flower and you hand it to some other person or you don't.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I like the metaphor because I think it, to me, that love starts inside, right? And you can feel that there's something different about this particular person. Again, I'm thinking about a recent brush with a relationship that I had, um, and like there was something there, right? And there was mutual attraction. The timing was all off. The timing wasn't there, um, but there was definitely something real that I felt, and I do know that they felt that too. But it didn't. Again, the timing wasn't going to allow that garden to um, really grow. But I think, to your point, as like it is something. I like that distinction between there's the feeling and then the relationship is a thing that can grow into that, right? Um, so I think in terms of like love does sort of like separate connection. I know I kind of blended those two terms earlier, but I think love does sort of highlight specific people that there's, I think, a deeper connection with, or there's potential or want for a deeper connection with that particular person. Like there's something inside of you, it's hard to pin down, that says this person, we need this person in our life more than other people. Not to say that other people are important, but there is something about who we are as humans that we will pick out this a particular individual and say, I want our connection to be deeper. I want
Mhm.
our connection to be as close as it possibly can get, right? Um, and
Sure.
fuck if I know how to define that, but I think to me that's sort of like what, from a process perspective, is what's happening there.
That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to just spend 2 hours defining the word love.
Well, shit.
I wanna pop to CJ's question here. Do you think love is a byproduct of evolution? Do you guys have thoughts on that?
Yes. I mean, I think it could be, because I think we're social creatures, and I think any dopamine blasts we get from forming specific connections with specific people um, helped our survival early on, when we didn't have words to more accurately describe what was going on. And then as we did, I think love can help facilitate stronger communities. Takes a village to raise a child, concept that pops in my brain. Think about various cultures around the world prior to colonialism, like communities were tight and close, um, and people insulated each other. And if somebody faltered, if somebody did something wrong, they weren't abandoned or kicked out or stigmatized. The community worked together to solve that problem. Um, Again, all that was just dismantled by colonialism, and we're still they're only starting to rebuild it now. But
Yeah.
um, I think it's weird because love is a commercialized concept. Like when I hear it, um, but what it highlights, I think, is very much could have been a process of evolution. But I'm only speaking at it from my perspective. So I'll happy
Yeah.
to lob it up to either of you. See what you think.
I think the sort of dopamine rush that you get from what we would qualify as love lasts a lot longer than the dopamine rush of like sexual activity.
Mm-hmm.
And to build those communities and to like work as a team in times when, again, going like way back to like indigenous people and like or indigenous people and even back to like being cavemen and just starting our like hunter gatherer journey, um like we needed each other to survive. Like we're not, as humans, we're not really built to live solo. Like we have to
Mm-hmm.
live in packs, and we're social creatures. We're apes. We want to groom each other and whatever. And that connection, that chemical connection that says, hey, being in a group is good, being in a group is safe, like that, over time we've sort of commodified into this feeling of love. And it's like there's different
Mm-hmm.
kinds of communities that you can have and that are less emotionally um strong or like highlighted as love, but are just as important.
Mm-hmm.
um so I think, is it a byproduct of evolution? I think so. Like I think love benefits us as a species
Yeah.
because it keeps us together, it keeps us in that pack where we can better survive as a species.
I'm trying to think. See, if I knew more about biology, I would know more about this. But I don't know. Like I don't know if the same sense of connection was the same, 60,000 years ago, that were humans experiencing love in the context of what we are to say it's a biological evolution. I would say for sure though that the development of love and how we express it and experience it on that level is a like emotional evolution, being from a primal state where it was probably undefined, right? Like it was just something that a human experienced, and that their whole life that was just how it was. Whereas like I think over the last couple thousand years we've developed language for it, and we've analyzed it, and we've we've manipulated it, and we've taken advantage of it, but we've also been, very invested in it and kind of looking to see how we can do this better. um so I don't know. I think it's a mishmash of everything.
Yeah.
But
Like
yeah, I
it's
think
a thing that is both socially constructed but based on something that could be evolutionary.
correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, I'm
That
gonna
is
have
my hypothesis.
CJ, I'm gonna skip your next question because I think that's outside the scope of this particular topic. Um, but yeah, so it's, what purpose does love serve us? Is sort of like both as a society and both as humans. It's like, what when we limit ourselves to one kind of love, what kind of purpose does that serve us? Other than, say people who experience lots of different kinds of love, or
Mm-hmm.
compersion for other people, like feeling love for other people's love. It's like we kind of go back to that heteronormity thing of like loving one person for the rest of your life and that being the only type of love that you can have. Does that actually serve you? Even if the
Mm-hmm.
feeling feels good, is that truly beneficial?
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to connect it back to something we were talking about, I think, on the last one about the. And I'm going to use the term here, and you can let me know if if it doesn't fit. But the heartbreak of losing a friend who enters into that heteronormative dynamic doesn't talk to you anymore, regardless of what the gender expression identity relationship dynamic is. um, Regardless of what that is, usually there people they'll cut off friends, right? And as friends who have been cut off, like it there's heartbreak there, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like I, I wasn't interested in anything more than what we had, but now I don't even have the thing that we had, and uh, it's confusing, you know, to lose that friend because I think there's lots of reasons why those things happen, but um, I think when we look at it, it's hard not to see the heteronormativity there and the hierarchy of
Yeah.
romantic love takes the place of everything. You're allowed nothing else once you've found your person, um, and preferably your person is the opposite gender of you,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah,
that's
which
how
means
society's.
you can't have any of those friends that are the same gender as your partner.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's the friendship heartbreak is real, and we used to call it. Again, I was a teenager when they used this term. But whenever any of our guy friends from the nerd group would get a girlfriend, they would call it slipping and falling into a vagina.
Sorry, what?
It's like slipping and falling into a black hole. They're just never seen again.
Okay. Wow. Okay. All right.
So
Sorry, I
that
just
was
had a visualization of that, and it was very disturbing a little bit. I was like, "Vagina's that big? Wow."
yeah. But that was like a way for the other guys in our group to express like their like they don't get to see their friend anymore and they were heartbroken, but they didn't know how to like actually say those words like, oh, I'm sad my friend doesn't come around very more. They'd be like, oh, fuck that guy, he just slipped and fallen into a vagina. Like
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Wow. I mean, that is one way to put it, for sure.
Well, and like I think that's connected to like sort of an inherent misogyny there because I think
yeah, oh yeah.
like when you look at that sort of dynamic, like that romantic relationship, like even just from like a heterosexual perspective, I think really only from a heterosexual perspective, nothing is supposed to come in the way of your bros, right?
Right.
Nothing, right? You're supposed to want to be with a girl, right? You know, to use that heteronormative sort of language there, but she's not supposed to take over everything, right?
No.
The ideal sort of like heteronormative dynamic is, well, to be perfectly frank, like, and lots of feminist scholars sort of identified this, is that the girlfriend takes place of the mother in a lot of ways, right? Um, Cis heterosexual men transition from mom to girlfriend to wife, right? And hopefully girlfriend becomes wife, right? As it's supposed to go, the script goes anyways, right? And so I think there's lots of entitlement that can come up in that dynamic, and it largely goes unquestioned. So again, lots of feminist scholars have been pointing this out for decades, right? Been trying to point to this, and it's still deeply, deeply entrenched in a lot of our cultural contexts and stuff like that. Um, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I think it explains, not that it excuses that sort
Oh
of
no, but
casual
that's
misogyny.
100% where that was based. Was
Yeah,
that like it's like this person doesn't have a role in in our group anymore because they've entered into a relationship, and that person that they have entered into a relationship with doesn't have a role in our group because it's a woman.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Well, it's the whole term whipping. Like if you're whipped, right, in a relationship, it's the the entanglement of the women, who's taking my bro away from all the bro things that we do on bro time.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Is that wait, is bro time an hour before or after Mountain Standard?
I think
Bro time shifts
I think it's on
around.
the other universe.
Yeah,
It's another
it's a
dimension.
temporal anomaly.
I don't
It's a temporal
understand.
anomaly.
Anyway.
Got another
um
question.
oh,
Is love a duality between dangerous and safe, a combination and contradiction of security and adventure?
goes on the half hour.
Like,
Exactly,
Sandra. Oh shit.
Oh.
Ooh, is love a duality? I think we were talking about this a little bit at the beginning, but we as a group may lean more towards the safe side being more of the larger component of love.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in my interpretation of love doesn't contain any dangerous aspects to it.
Yeah,
I don't think love has space to push you to an extent where your safety is at a level that the uncomfortable feelings start coming into it. Love is also like to bring a motorcycle reference into this because I have to, because that's who I am.
Nerd.
Nerd. There's a lot of girlfriends out there of these guys who ride, and the guys will say, well, if you love me, you'll get on my bike.
Mm.
I'm a good rider.
Like
I'm so good about this. And I don't know how many videos I've seen on YouTube of these guys performing for their buds in the groups that they're riding with, and their girlfriends fly off the back of their bikes and they have road rash because they're going 130 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And she's lucky to walk away. That interpretation of love, because it's dangerous, it's risk taking, it's intense, it's feverish. It's not to say that intensity can't be also safe.
Yeah.
Right? There's a demonstration of that where it is contained in a safe environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also say there's lots of love that is safe, that is adventurous. If anything, probably this stuff is very adventurous in a safe way.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think with love comes vulnerability, not unsafety and danger, right?
Right.
And when you sort of embrace that sense of vulnerability within the context of love, adventure gets way easier. Not that it's still not scary sometimes, but I mean, just talking, not to use as a relationship escalator, but becoming a parent is a scary fucking thing, right? And I think people choose that because there's this strong bond that they have. And they're like, this thing is scary as fuck, but I love you, you love me, let's do this thing together, you know?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be becoming a parent. It can be going on a trip, can be quitting jobs, it can be moving to different locations, right?
It could be kinky stuff.
It could be kinky stuff,
It could be
right?
kinky stuff.
Could involve handcuffs, could involve lots of things.
I will. Yes. Sorry. Continue.
Well, I was gonna say, but the key thing for me is that lots of media likes to throw this likes to blend or freaking forgetting the other word for it, likes to blend love and danger, right, and risk taking, and I can only see that as problematic. Again, there's vulnerability in love. There's lots of vulnerability in love, and that's why it can be so fucking scary. But danger, risk, lack of security, I don't know. I don't believe it. That's just me.
It's funny because I often see this come from the opposite side of that. Instead of love creating a space that is like where you can be vulnerable and that is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
In that vulnerability, creating a space where love happens, and specifically in my work in kink, because people will come in for sessions in a doing an activity that intentionally makes them feel vulnerable. And if you go back and you do that thing over and over again, you trust this other person with this thing that makes you feel vulnerable or maybe makes you feel unsafe, but in a safe way, like
Mm-hmm.
the trappings of unsafety. And that turns into like feelings of love.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this happen with long-term clients a lot, where like over time they start to confuse the two. It's like, oh, I can be vulnerable and I can trust you, and we do this thing that makes my heart go a million miles an hour and does all the dopamine in my brain, and like I've bypassed any sort of relationship escalator with you and we have gone straight to the vulnerability. Clearly I love you.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where those two sort of get confused because you didn't go from like you didn't encounter love and vulnerability in the same sphere. You encountered vulnerability and then interpreted it as love.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where sometimes clients kind of go astray. It's like, well,
Yeah.
you are paying for a service, sir.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
And lots of times also I'll see that with very kink heavy relationships where kink heavy relationships will last a lot longer than they really have any right to because the vulnerability that you experience within a kink relationship, say just meet someone and you do a couple of play sessions with them, you run a scene with them, and like that vulnerability creates a connection. It's almost like trauma bonding.
Mm.
And like and that connects you in such a way that you think the love happens much sooner than it really does, or it happens at a much stronger force than it really does.
Mm-hmm.
And you think and people end up staying in those relationships for much longer than is really healthy if the relationship doesn't work out because they have this like base of like, oh, I could be very vulnerable with you, and then they
Mm-hmm.
confuse that with love.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that vulnerability for it to be like it is in the presence of love, but I think that vulnerability has to be present, or that willingness to be vulnerable has to be present in multiple different contexts within that dynamic. So, like you're saying, does if that vulnerability only exists within this narrow window of the dynamic, right, and there's no vulnerability anywhere else, it's hard to see that as a healthy relation, like you're talking about, right? That's when things get really problematic, um, and I think that's going back to what we were saying earlier. Like that, to me, love is that I can be vulnerable in any context, right? Not that I'm going to trauma dump on whoever this person is, um, but I guess the boundary thing, right? I can be vulnerable, but I can also be willing to accept boundaries that this person sets, and that the boundaries I don't take as personal, right? So if a person sets boundaries with me, I set boundaries with them. If I don't feel scared to set boundaries, if they don't feel scared to set boundaries with me, um, I see love present in that whole dynamic. I don't think you can really set those without that being present, right?
Right.
You can set boundaries to determine the edges of the map of the dynamic, right? But I think in those deeper connections, setting boundaries, not being afraid to set boundaries, not being afraid to accept other people's boundaries, um, I think that's where love changes the dynamic a little bit.
I agree.
So, can you actually be in love at first sight then?
Is that one of our questions?
No,
No.
I'm
No,
just making that a
That's off
thing.
the cuff. That's off the cuff.
That's
Nice.
off
very
the
good
cuff.
question. Can you be in love at first sight? No, I think it's a fallacy.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a myth
I think you can
sold
be
to us.
infatuated at first sight.
Well,
I
this is
think you
what I was going to lead into. Yeah,
Ah,
can
ah,
be crushes at first sight, but
yeah,
love,
right.
yeah. The, the idea, like, yeah, again, there can be, again, going back to the near miss I had, it, this person stood out in any sort of context I encountered them in. Um, and that, I think there was something in me that was like, I want to be closer to this person. But it wasn't until we actually started communicating that there was something more there. I was interested for sure, um, but I wouldn't. I think it would be falling into the tropes in movies and TV shows to call it love at first sight. You know,
Hmm.
I think if things had worked out and 5 years down the line, we would look back on that or those earlier moments and say, yeah, that was love at first sight. That's a rewriting of history.
yes, I agree.
We connected early on. We saw something in each other early on, that eventually led to something more. But that doesn't mean that love at first sight exists. So I'm gonna say no, it doesn't.
No, I don't think so either.
Kara,
Oh
what do you think?
no.
No, of course.
No,
Just thought I'd ask.
absolutely not. And I don't mean that in a like diminutive way, sort of. It's more along the lines of just I think you can have a connection with someone, and that's the interest check mark being hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not love. And I think people really need to kind of reassess and check in with themselves when that happens. Because when you apply, you're like, oh, I'm already in love with you. There's a lot of entitlement and
Mm-hmm.
interjection on a person's life because of that label.
Yeah.
It's also so much harder to leave. Like if something turns
Oh,
out the
yeah.
way that you didn't think it was going to turn out, like if you've already decided that you're in love with that person, then it's so much harder to leave a person you love than to leave a person that you're like, "Oh, we hung out and it was cool and
Mm,
like we're good friends." Like it's so much harder to
Mm-hmm.
once you've already decided that you're at that level to get out of a situation that could be toxic. Right?
Yeah.
Cuz again, it's that like you've just decided that they love you and that's what love looks like.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm thinking a lot of people get to that place of like, I love this person because there's more than a few aspects about this person that I enjoy, right? And again, I'm thinking back to conversations I had when I was doing the work that I was doing, um, and that's why people were really confused why people would stay in problematic dynamics, right? Is you know from an outside perspective, all they saw was the violence that was happening, but from
Right.
within that dynamic, there could still be many really good things,
Mhm.
and the one aspect that's not working, or and again, I don't want to use that to diminish the violence that might be happening, um, but when you're in it, it's so much easier to grasp onto the things that worked or are still working, right?
Yeah.
And to abandon those things because this one aspect, it's much, as a human being, we're much more likely to hope for things to improve than we are to cut and run, because cutting and running involves an emotional sacrifice that is just too painful. Again, that's why a lot of people will leave and come back and leave and come back and leave and come back all the time, because
Or it's a
that,
conflict that's too dangerous to even approach.
yeah,
Yeah.
or they know, well, it's well documented that leaving a relationship is the most dangerous time for a partner, especially women, right? um, that is the most dangerous time. That is most likely when severe violence and murder is going to occur, is when the person is leaving that dynamic, not in it, when they're leaving it,
Mhm.
right? Because again, that other person feels that person slipping under their control, and a lot of domestic violence, sexual violence is heavily entrenched in a sense of entitlement to another person, right?
Yep.
So the abusive partner feels entitled to this other being, um, and sees the leaving as an affront to that entitlement, right? But that's a different topic. I don't want to go down that
Yeah.
road because that's a way more
I
complicated
will
topic.
I will say that kind of does bring me up to what I would like to add to my definition of love is that love is not ownership.
Hmm.
Yes.
I love my partner. Like I've been with her for 4.5, almost 5 years now, and like I love her deeply. But at the end of the day, she's going to make her own decisions, and like she's going to do what is best for her.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's something that comes up and we need to make a choice for our relationship, we're going to do what we can for our relationship. But at the end of the day, we both know that we're going to make the decisions that are best for us because
Yeah.
she doesn't own my life and I don't own her life.
Correct.
And like whatever whatever that ends up being is it's more important to us for us to feel safe and secure in who we are and to not rely on a relationship to give us something that
Mm-hmm.
we don't have than it is to own each other or to feel entitled to each other in any way. Not even just like bodies, like financially or our futures.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't feel entitled to her future and she doesn't feel entitled to mine.
Yeah.
But we're happy for what we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that can be unsettling for the. Actually, just seeing a question here about non-capitalist love. I think that's what you're talking about, Des. Right? Is
Mhm.
that you don't own the other person. Capitalist love. I think when I think about capitalist hegemonic heterosexual love is incredibly ownership based, right? I mean, you look at the whole institution of marriage, right? It's literally properly based. Well, it has roots in property based stuff. Maybe not so much anymore, but those threads or ripples of property ownership still
I mean,
persist.
dad walking the bride down the aisle. Hey,
Yep.
sir, can you not? Excuse me, sir.
So I think that's a thing that, well, when I look at a lot of queer theory, I think a lot of queer theory is undoing or trying to undo some of that ownership model of romantic love. Um, but it still persists even in queer dynamics, though, right? Because it's so entrenched around in our society, in everything we encounter, right? This idea that if I love somebody, I own them; they're mine, right? Um, and I remember having a conversation with a friend and colleague about this, right? Where it's like my partner. It's like I I know grammatically what that thing is about, but um, I think my partner doesn't bother me as much as like my wife or my husband. You know, maybe more so with my wife because that ownership piece is still there. It's so attached to that term. You know. Um,
Yeah, I think when you get into like logistically though, it's easier to say my partner than it is to say this person who has chosen to be in a relationship with me.
yeah, 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 yeah. I stumble on the logic of my
Language
discomfort
is
with
imperfect.
my
Yeah, no, I would
words.
have more issue with like people when they make comments like, "Oh, they're mine,"
Yeah,
Yeah,
in reference to a partner. They
yeah,
belong to me. Like that kind of language is a little bit
no.
yeah,
questionable.
This is mine. This belongs to me. I
That
legally
that
own it.
is that is your pet.
yeah.
All right, get down now.
Getting scritches.
He's so needy.
I would love a needy cat. That'd be a
Oh.
You
needy
can have mine. I'll bring him. No, I'm kidding. I love him.
Okay, so what the when we did that little bit of a turn about, love at first sight and then what we've gone into, but the question really is, okay, then how do we define the difference between infatuation and what is described as love then? Because I sit in the thing where I have very, very, very little experience with infatuation. In fact, I don't think my brain is capable of it. I don't know. It's something that people describe, and I go, that's
That
that's
must be nice for you.
that must be nice for you. um, uh, it, like I'm trying to think about my whole life, and I'm like, okay, I must have been infatuated at some point, but there isn't like an instance where I'm just like, oh yeah, I remember that. It's either I've forgotten about it or whatever. But the point being is that people can interpret and develop love that is to themselves, and they're able to contain it for themselves either because it's not, if it's not mutual or it's not required, and you kind of sit there and you go, well, infatuation, how do we define the difference then between love that we develop within ourselves for another person, even if we tell them or if we don't tell them, versus this idea of infatuation of, I am so attracted to you that I will do everything in my power to get your attention. Is that the definition of infatuation? I
I
feel
don't
like
think
that's
so.
no.
I
What
think
is
I
it
think
No.
then?
no, I think the I am so attracted to you point, yes. But I have definitely been infatuated with people that I've not pursued anything with
Mm-hmm.
because
Okay, sure.
like because it's like, I'm an adult now and some things are just not logical. Like I can't, I can't be horny on main all the time. Like
The debacle of our current state.
like it's not useful and it's not kind always to be horny on main all the time. But I think it's it's much more of a gradient than it is a hard
Mm-hmm.
line. Like I think infatuation and love can sort of commingle, like the beginnings of love and sort of the still with the feelings of infatuation. But I think it's more of a Pokemon evolution. It's like sort of a like, you know, it's You
Go,
still
keep going, Des.
you
Keep going.
still maintain the original form of the thing, which is
Uh-huh.
infatuation, only it grows and evolves into something that's more complicated.
Right.
Hmm.
You know, Squirtle into Wartortle into Blastoise.
I was
Nerd.
waiting for it. I was like, I wonder which ones Des is gonna pick.
It just gets more hoses. Just gets more water games.
Love just
Oh
gets
man,
more hoses over time. Yeah.
this could be horny on main. Stop it. Stop. Just
Squirtle?
saying.
Pokemon references?
Squirtle? Come on, Joe. Come on.
What?
Keep
What?
up.
Excuse me, are
I'm
you
not getting
accusing
horny.
me of being horny on main, Kara?
I mean, maybe a
I
little
would
bit.
never.
I would never. Love.
I'm
No,
only
In,
but
talking
in the
about
Roxy
purity.
3X's terms.
I'm only
I
talking about
love it.
purity
Do
emotion.
more.
I love it. Do more.
Do more.
It's
Sorry, Joe. I cut you off there.
the
I was gonna
callback.
say
The
I agree
callback that
with
nobody will.
I was gonna say I agree with Dez's thing that like it is something that grows and evolves. It's not a hard line. Love and infatuation. Um,
Because there's also friendship infatuation. There's friendship crushes. I've
yeah.
experienced like with people who like I sort of know peripherally, and it's like I feel like I would get along with you so well. I
Yeah.
feel like I could sit down and watch a movie with you and riff back and
Oh, I
forth.
see. Okay.
Like I feel like we could play video games together and we would be so fun.
Hmm.
Like I've had a friendship crush on Val for as long as I've known her on the internet. Like I'm already convinced we're best friends and we've literally never met in person.
Yeah. Val's currently upset because there's no internet at the hotel she's at right now. So
Oh no.
Oh, poor Val.
we'll have to tell we'll tell Val that you have a friendship crush on her.
Duh.
But
Duh.
But
yeah,
it's
no,
like
that's go
that's
ahead.
real. That's like an early stage of infatuation. That's like, oh, I feel like I could pursue this connection and
Hmm.
that connection would be good for both of us.
Yeah.
Like I'm interested in pursuing this connection and it's not romantic in any way. It's just I have a friendship crush on you. I want to do
Yeah.
friend things with you.
So again, I think infatuation, I think, is a loaded term because of other external influences. But I think to me, infatuation should, in a lot of ways, be a neutral term, in that it only describes this swell of feelings for a particular individual, right? And it's going to be different for different contexts, right? So you have friendship infatuation, you have romantic infatuation, and it becomes on the person with the feelings of infatuation to contextualize those feelings, right? Um, and to have outlets for when that pressure builds, I guess you could say, and to not put that pressure build on the person or the object of infatuation, right?
Yes.
So again, to go back to my near miss here, um, I was trying to play it so cool when we actually started meeting in person and stuff like that, and we actually
So
started
cool.
texting. I was like, I was being real cool about it. I was being real cool, but there was inside there was this like, oh my god, I want to tell this person everything. I want to text them constantly every day. Um, and then sort of when sort of came out that our feelings for each other were mutual, that just like there was this like eruption, and I still sort of like dampened that down. I'm like, okay, we're gonna take this nice and like an adult, and we're gonna be measured with this, and we're gonna be cool about it. Um, but inside, I was freaking out, right? So that was that infatuation because there was this swell of emotions for this one person, right? Again, I wouldn't say that that kind of stuff is bad in and of itself. It becomes bad when people choose to do harmful things with that or to allow it to bleed into that sense of entitlement. Because I'm infatuated with this person, I'm entitled to this person. And that's when it becomes toxic and harmful and all that kind of shit.
Yeah. Like that's my friend. You can't know. That's my friend.
How dare you talk to them? How dare you?
No.
Don't talk to my friend. They're mine.
Yeah. I have lots of friendship crushes. And it's sometimes hard for me to like really level it down and then sometimes I just choose not to. It's like I just put it out there. I'm like, we're best friends now. Like whatever. And they can tell me if we're not best friends or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I like if I feel like we've got a good vibe going and I'm like, we're friends. Yeah, that's just the thing that's happening right now. And I've had that work out in my favor a lot. You just tell people that you're friends and like you've already had a good rapport and things are going good, and you're like, "Are we best friends now?" It's like, "Yeah, I guess we're best friends now." Great. That's sort of what happened with me and Fembot, because I was always really impressed with like how Fembot like presented themselves professionally, and like
Hmm.
they were in my friend group, but I really didn't get to hang out with her very much. And we had this one party where we got to like really hang out and really connect, and I was like, oh, we're best friends now. Like I'd already had this friendship crush on you, and like we really connected in this one time, and it's like, oh, okay, we're best friends now. And now that's legitimately like one of the closest people in my life. And it started with like, oh, I really appreciate how you present yourself, and I really like appreciate the kind of work that you're doing, and you're already friends with the people that I hang out with, and like so it seems like we would vibe. Like it started out small and with sort of a little weird friendship crush, and then, you know, 5 years later, she's one of my like heart people.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes, the old stepbrothers. Are we best friends now? Did we just
Yeah.
become best friends? So much room for activities.
One of my the streamers I follow, or I did follow, had that as their follow notification, and I
Are we
can't get
best
it out of
friends
my
now?
brain. Yep.
It's the reverse of mine, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Are we best friends now?
I don't know. Need to think about that.
If anyone can understand, I am not a very easy person to enter any type of
That's
relationship
a lie.
with.
That's a lie.
It's not a lie. It's not a lie, and you know that, Joe.
No,
You
it's
know
not.
that.
That's a lie. You're a very easy person to get to know.
Well,
Yeah.
you better buckle in, and it's a long road.
Didn't say it was a quick process. I just said it
Yeah,
wasn't hard.
That's
Yeah. It's just like some people are very like, oh, okay, the book starts on like the actual story of the book starts on page 5. And some
Yeah.
people are like, the actual story of the book starts on page 374.
Yep.
And it's like
that seems about right.
you got to read through the 374 pages of prologue, and then if you've really committed to being 374 pages, then the plot happens, and
Yeah.
that's fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just saw
It's
a friend
more of a
on.
character study than it is a Michael Bay film.
Yeah, exactly. I just saw a friend on Friday who's that friend, right? There was the 320-page prologue leading up to our friendship, right?
Right. Yes.
And now it's invested, but I don't see that as being hard. Or I mean, again, some dynamics are going to develop faster than others, and that doesn't mean that the faster ones are better.
No.
You know?
No, I don't want to apply any good or bad to a lot of that stuff, because I know that some humans make those connections really quickly, which I, for the majority of my life, just never understood. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was tried to not make that judgment of like, well, what the fuck do you both know about each other? Like, how can you be friends now? But there are ways. But the point is yeah, like there's no right or wrong. People are just different, and the navigation through life is just like, are you willing to listen to what's happening around you?
Yeah.
Right? Are you gonna kind of sync up with the people in your life? And sometimes it works and sometimes it does not. And yes, Xandra, to apply to be my friend, it must also be form 449-A, and it must be in Tahoma font. Good luck.
We're gonna make a jot form just for you, just for friendship applications.
Didn't
gonna do
Carrie?
that.
Didn't we have paperwork for you last stream too?
Yes.
Episode?
Yes. There's
Okay.
also paperwork to be my girlfriend. But that's a
I
much
feel
more
like
difficult form to
I feel
fill
like
out.
it's a continuing like application process. It's like first you have to like there's the first stage of interviews in which
Yeah.
you become a friend,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
there's 6 to 8 years of interviews, and then
Correct. Correct. This is I feel like I'm slightly being exposed, but it is so true that I cannot deny it. So there's also that.
Sandra,
It's
your
fine.
triplicate joke would have been well received, I think.
Yes. I also want to say I don't want to gatekeep love because I
Hmm.
feel like everybody has differing levels for what that means to them and for what like someone has to evoke in them like to get to that level of love. Like I don't want to subscribe to like the relationship escalator of like you have to be dating like a year before you can say that you
Hmm.
love a person or
No,
like you
no.
really have to know like cuz there are like genuinely I am one of those people who I say I love you to a lot of people and I genuinely mean it. But
Hmm.
I love them within the context of that relationship. I don't prescribe to one certain idea of love. It's like the way that I love Snow is different than the way that I love Fembot, different than the way that I love my girlfriend,
Hmm.
different than the way that I love you guys.
Hmm.
And like all of that is equally valid in me and I think that that's okay. I don't think anybody needs to like meet a certain requisite of like this is the time that I need to get to know you and blah 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 blah. Sometimes the connection happens fast and sometimes it happens slow. Sometimes it's deep. Sometimes it's like a little bit like shallow for a long time, but then like it gets deeper as time goes on.
Hmm.
Like I am all about the free love. I don't think that there's a limited amount of love in people's hearts that they can give. I think that's a choice you make
Yeah.
on who you love.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Not not in all things. I won't say that love is a choice, but like love is a thing that you do.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It's to me it's not like something that has come upon you like a sickness. It's not a disease you catch. It's a thing you do.
Yeah.
And you do every day or you do whenever you're with that person. It's the ways that you express that love are all different.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and kind of taking on to that a little bit, it's just like there's this delicacy with navigating how how you do love, right? And it's really important. Like I'll say as as like discovering I was a lesbian, you're just like, oh wow, I suppressed that love that I had for such a long time in my life to the point where I couldn't even express the interest in someone
Hmm.
or the qualities of someone that I thought was attractive in fear of something, right? Let alone telling this one or two person at the time that I actually like them, right? Because that's a different conversation. But it's just it's the so just saying Des is just like, yeah, there shouldn't be any gatekeeping of love, and especially if we're in a societal environment where that love is seen as by a large group of people disgusting or a sin or all these other things that people really discredit and oppress actively.
Hmm.
um you know there is practice to love, is what I'm trying to get at. So
Mhm.
like by Des saying or Fembot saying love is a verb, right? If we don't express ourselves or develop that feeling of love, it's like a muscle and we don't get it. And we can
Yep.
feel very, very void of that quite easily. And I think especially when we talk about self-love, the love for, this entity that can be ourselves, that's another type of love that I think a lot of us don't recognize or hold
Hmm.
space for within ourselves because we suppress it. We find reasons to not love who we are all the time, whether
Hmm.
that's from societal pressures or families or people or whatever it might be. Um, it's interesting, like the evolution of learning to have space for self-love and then actively learning to say, like, I don't think I told, like, Joe, I didn't tell you that, like, I loved you until like 6 or 7 years after
Oh yeah.
we
No, we
like
had the 400-page prologue.
Yes,
to
yeah,
that
yeah,
point, right?
yeah. But for me and my upbringing and you know my household, that just you didn't do that. You didn't
Yeah.
say to other
Yeah.
people, "Oh, I love you," or "I love that you do this," or "I love this about you," or whatever. That was never a thing. It's not that it was a household void of love. That was just not a method that neither of the parties involved expressed it.
Yeah.
So when I came out into the world, where I was like, "Oh, fuck, there's like things that people say to another so that people understand that that you love them, and you care about them and you want them to do really well in life. Sometimes that needs to be expressed in some way. It can't just be assumed.
Yes.
Yeah. um and that takes skill, that takes effort, and that takes trying.
Mm-hmm.
And full disclosure, I'm terrible at it. I have to work on it constantly and I catch myself all the time. Like, if you're part of our Discord, I recently did a self-care check-in and I was like, tell someone you love that you love them. And I was like delaying it, delaying it, delaying it. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna text Joe. and and because it's safe and it is love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've never had any worries about expressing that with you.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's always like hesitation around the degrees, I don't want to say degrees of love, the variations of love, right? Because the context of it can be more dynamic or not.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting how you can go for, you know, I'm 32 now, you know, the majority of my life where that was not a thing that you did,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So it's, I think people need to recognize like telling your friends that you love them shouldn't be weird,
Yeah.
right? Now, I have my own interpretation of how often you should do that because there's different energy levels there. Um, but it's I think it is important for us to express love in healthy ways, in secure ways, in ways that it is mutually designed, um, and it feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I
Totally.
think there's more ways to express love than just saying I love you.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Um, which is a perfect segue into, we're
Also,
now going to talk about
I don't know
love
if you guys
languages.
were paying attention to my cat being fucking stupid in the background. He has stolen my laundry.
Mm. Do you have to go chase it down?
Now I have to put it back in the basket.
To see the gold eyes in the background.
He literally took it out of the basket, like dangled it off the table, and then dropped it on the
Boy,
floor.
obviously.
He's helping in his own way.
Everything in that
He's
house,
helping.
Des, is Pippin's.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the segue was into love languages, so
Yes.
right. That's
Segues
good.
Right,
into
right,
love
right.
languages. What
Yeah.
are your Okay, well first of all, let's talk about the kinds of love languages. There is uh words of affirmation, like actually literally saying I love you, or saying I appreciate this thing about you, or saying I love this thing about you, like,
Mm-hmm.
saying the words.
Yeah.
There's quality time, spending time with another person, like, hanging out, whether that's actively doing a thing or not actively doing a thing, just hanging out. There's acts of service, doing things for your partner, whether that's or for whoever. I won't say partner. Um, you know, physically doing things, or doing some form of task or thing for a person. What else? Physical touch, the
Yep.
touchies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what's the last one? What am I missing?
Gifts. Receiving
Gifts.
gifts.
Receiving it or giving gifts, which is pretty self-explanatory.
I
Mhm.
got that thing up.
Oh, look at you being all
She
I did my
prepared.
homework.
Um,
Joe is the only
maybe,
one capable of doing their homework this week. I'm
yeah,
prepping. I'm prepping for an international trip.
I have no excuse.
I'm between
You were
jobs.
editing a lot this week.
I have no
Oh, I
excuse
was
not to do my homework.
stupid
So
editing. Anyway, um, before we go into this discussion, there was something that Joe and I were talking about just before, though, is I think let us be conscious of the love languages are not solid confinements of things, right?
Mhm.
And these should not be approached from an idea of if this is how someone expresses this to you, that you only do this thing, right? Everything is a gradient. So let's be conscious about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we talked about this when we were talking about the INTJ, INFP
Yeah,
stuff.
it's
Like,
the same thing.
it's
Yeah.
not this like, it's not meant to be this defining thing about a person and box you in. But it is meant to be sort of a guidepost or
Yeah.
a map
Just a
for
way for us
understanding.
to or to explain something that is very ephemeral. And he's gonna knock over. Yep.
Yeah, there we go. Classic,
Oh,
classic cat.
Pippin, gotta use those murder mitts for something since we don't let them kill everything now.
Pippin, you're being a dick. Stop it. Sorry.
Yeah. So, but again, it does sort of identify certain patterns, right?
Mhm.
And I think, like we've been talking about throughout this the conversation tonight, is knowing ourselves is a big part of building these connections and building bonds of love, right? Is knowing what works for us, right? And so that's really what the love languages thing is meant to sort of highlight. Is more often than not, I like to receive love in these certain ways. It's
Yep.
going to be different for different people, right? And part of the conversation, and this is what Karen and I were talking about, is understanding that a certain partner, let's say, or a certain friend is going to lean towards expressing love in certain ways, right? And it might not align with how we receive love or like to receive love, right? So I scored 0 on words of affirmation, which I find hilarious to me. I don't know what that says about me, but they always put like a words of affirmation thing next to a any of the other 4, right? And so I'm not opposed or against.
That actually really surprises me about you
Really, really.
because I think you value very clear communication.
I do value very clear communication, but I don't
So
know.
it so I would assume like it just knowing you and you not having taken the test, I would assume that words of affirmation would be much higher.
Hmm, interesting.
That's just the thing.
But again, it was always phrased around like I'm blanking on the actual phrasing of some of the things, and so I think the phrasing made a big difference for me. So I think
Mhm.
maybe words of affirmation would change if it was like love was expressed in a different verbal way, because I think it was
Mhm.
very literal. It's like
Yeah, it's
people
like
saying, "I literally love you," or "I literally appreciate this about you," right? It's like, but that was always weighed against um, spending quality time, right? Or like literally just physically being in the same room as a partner, right? I value that more than I value the actual saying of the thing. Not that I'm
right.
against the saying of the thing, but being present with the person I care about means a lot more to me than the verbal things, right?
Right.
So
Can
again, it's not meant to be mutually exclusive,
Oh yeah.
but it is meant to understand yourself in a lot of ways, right? And so that again, if I was with somebody who was more on the words of affirmation side of things, I would have to be a bit more conscious about verbally expressing my
Yes.
love for that person, right? Because we might be sitting in the same room not speaking, and I'm perfectly totally content in absolute ecstasy, maybe, right? Just by literally sitting on the same couch as the other person and we're doing our own thing,
mhm.
but they might not be okay with that, right? So I think that's something for me to be mindful of, that this is how I receive love, but this is how these are also maybe gaps that I have,
Mhm.
Right.
right? um, my top ones were physical touch 33, quality time 30%, and acts of service 20, and receiving gifts was around 17%. So I will say, just to disclose here, I don't hope this is not TMI, but physical touch has moved up the chart. And I believe this is just where I'm at, given there's been a lot more dreams, not like sex dreams about people, but dreams about being connected with people. So
It's
clearly, I think,
definitely, especially in the quarantine era that we're currently in, like when you don't get a thing casually, it like moves up
yeah,
the importance scale. Cause
yeah,
like I like physical touch is not super high on my relationship. Like if I'm in a romantic relationship, physical touch is not like, it's probably not even top three. Um, because I'm very used to long distance relationships.
yeah, yeah.
So, um, but like I get the little bits of that from my like for like Kara's seen me hang out with other people. It's like I'm a very huggy person, or like I like to sit close to people on the couch. Like I like physical touch. I just don't. I get that in other places. It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
look, I can physically connect with another human, and I don't always consider that romantic. Like
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people. So it's just that's but now in the quarantine era, it's like, I don't physically see a lot of people very often, so I don't get a lot of physical hugs, so it moves up a little bit higher on my relationship thing because that's a thing that I need more because I'm not getting it from the people around me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I totally understand that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Feel validated.
That's what I'm here for. Validate people.
It'll
Uh,
always change.
oh yeah, and like the needs sort of
For sure.
change with what's currently going on in your life. Like
Mm-hmm.
for me, in this point of my life, acts of service is my number one. I don't even have to take the fucking quiz. I already know. Acts of service is my number one because I am so stressed in my life that if anybody takes the time to do a thing for me, that means that that is a thing that I don't have to do, that I don't have to think about, that I don't have to worry about, then
Mm-hmm.
that to me is so valuable because I like just with the energy that I have to put into doing just the normal things day to day, any sort of extra thing is like so daunting.
Yeah.
And so I know what that extra effort means for me. So, like, I appreciate it when it's given to me from other people much more. And like, gift giving used to be higher on my list, but now it's lower on my list
Mm-hmm.
because I like Pippin. Christ. This cat.
Look at that tail wag back there.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's such an asshole. Um, but like gift giving has gone lower on my list because of the work that I am in. I often receive I won't say often. I receive random gifts
Mm-hmm.
from people online. That is part of the thing that happens. And so it's not super high on my list because that's a thing that I get from other areas.
Mm-hmm.
Moose is just left. He's like, I can't deal with Pippin's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I have to leave.
I always like how he like emerges from the void and like
Yeah.
wanders off because he just blends with your rug in the carpet in the room there. There's a being there this whole time. We didn't
This
even
whole
see.
This whole
time.
time. And
Yeah.
now he's just a shadow in the doorway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, acts of service is my one. Words of affirmation. I really like words of affirmation because I like it when things are clear. I like the sort of continued like, oh okay, you still like me. That's very nice. I like to know. I don't like to guess. Uh, but those are probably my top two is words of affirmation or acts of service and words of affirmation. But again, I've been in a lot of long distance relationships and I'm pretty fine with it. So quality time is not huge with me and physical touch is not huge with me.
Kara, where do you stand after having heard
Uh,
the list?
I mean, I'm a simple woman. It's my pie chart is like 90% quality time and maybe 10% acts of service. That's pretty much how I would interpret how I sense love. Um, I think there's something in my brain that really quantifies someone wanting to choose to spend time with me as something that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't see words of affirmation being really important at all because I'm more of a sensing person rather than a talking person. And I mean, it could also just have to do with like how my upbringing was. Like you just didn't say it, you showed people, right? You
Yeah.
showed, you didn't tell. Um, what was the other? Gift giving? No, because I have a lot of anxiety around gift giving. What was the other one?
Physical touch.
Physical
Oh
touch.
fuck no. I think we already talked about that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I was gonna make some joke about where does physical touch rate on your scale, Kara?
yeah, it's if it's not even on the scale, it's in a negative zone. No, no. I touch for me is complicated.
Let's
I
imagine a scenario in which you are already in a relationship with a person.
This is a strong hypothetical,
I know.
guys.
Let's
Yeah, I mean, I would think that touch would be something that would obviously be approachable. Um, but I don't know. Like I authentically don't know how my mind and my body would approach touch. I have specific things that I like about touch, but it is not at a frequency that I think a lot of people have.
Hmm.
Um like I would never be a PDA type of person. Like I wouldn't enjoy holding a partner's hand everywhere. Um
Oh,
you
that's so
know,
fun.
yeah,
Sorry.
right, but
okay.
it's just something that like I don't look at and be like that entices me to do that.
Yeah.
Um
Like logistically, that doesn't work out for me because I'm shorter than everyone I date, and just their hand is like all the way up here, and mine is
right,
all the
right,
way
right.
down here, and it doesn't work out.
It doesn't work out. But saying that, like there's alternatives that I thought about. I was just like, but I wouldn't mind having like an arm on like looped into my like that the hold there or something like
Hmm.
that. Like that it's a different type of hold that's probably approachable in my life. Um I was only recently introduced to cuddling. That was an experience. But that's mostly because it was three humans in a tiny van for for a month. um but it's
Sort of
it's
encouraged cuddling.
yeah, yeah, basically. Heat warmth to not freeze to death at night cuddling. Um but no, like there was instances in that where I was just like, okay, I can approach this and not be so tense about it
Hmm.
because it's something that is just doesn't come naturally to me. Um so but yeah, like I'm very aware that touch is like such a comforting thing. I you know the here I'll disclose something that I don't know I find a little bit embarrassing, but sometimes like I fall asleep like this, like it's like like holding myself when I sleep
Mm.
That's
because
okay.
it's a type of touch that is I don't
It's
know,
self-soothing. It's
it's like
Yeah.
self-soothing.
self-soothing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
I cuddle my
so
pillow all the time.
Yeah.
yeah,
Same here. I have a
so
little U of pillows so that whenever I flip, whatever side I'm on,
right,
there's a pillow I can cuddle. So
totally. But yeah, yeah, so
massage
touch
paper.
is something I'm not super comfortable with, and I have a lot of anxiety if I had a partner in this hypothetical situation who is like main thing is physical touch.
Right.
Um that would cause me a lot of anxiety because I'd be constantly thinking about, oh, they don't think I love them
Hmm.
at all.
Yeah.
And to me, that might be a compatibility issue if I ever did get into that situation. Which is unfortunate because that would be a struggle, I think.
Yeah. Well, and again, we don't want to say that these are like hard line things, but I think
No, no.
again, going back to my own little orientation of the chart, I think I would have to work on the words of affirmation piece. Um, Probably gift giving a little bit, but um, I, I think it like in the ideal like for it to work out, I think there's adjustments you make to whoever you're with to accommodate what it is, right? I think if those are non-negotiables, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that's when it's like that becomes more of a breakage in that dynamic. But I mean, I think people can understand their partners, and I think that the deeper that understanding gets, I think the more you can appreciate who your partner is, right? And once you get a sense of what the muffin they bought from Tim Hortons means, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can appreciate that muffin from Tim Hortons a lot more because that's them showing love,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
Xander's basically said the perfect thing. When I was once comforting a friend who was crying and put a hand on her shoulder, she immediately started laughing and said, "That was really hard for you, wasn't it?" And yes, it was. And it's not always about doing the thing that is like that other person's love language. It is making the effort and
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
and knowing a person well enough that the effort is appreciated.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, because it's
Yeah.
a lot of the times it like really is it is the effort that counts. It's like, I know you're not super into physical touch and I know it's not super comfy for you to touch people, but like, I was having a hard moment. You put a hand on my shoulder. I know that was especially difficult for you. So I appreciate that hand touch way more than I would appreciate a hug from a person who just hugs everyone all the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with with literally any of them. It's like, for some people it's hard to, like for me quality time is hard with a partner because I am just so busy and I really really value my alone time.
Mm-hmm.
um and like it was one of the main reasons that I moved into an apartment by myself. It's like I need the alone time. I need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like so when I give up that alone time, like I mean essentially people are competing with me hanging out by myself, and me hanging out by myself is
Oh,
very valuable.
solo hangs will win all the time. All the time.
No, they don't, because like for like in a very direct friendship context, you're gonna hang out with us for like a full 48 hours.
Mm-hmm.
More than
And like
that.
yeah, more than that. In
Mhm.
like the next week. So I knowing how much you value your solo time and your alone time and your space, like I know the value of that hangout time
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
because I know the kind of person that you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The conflict of my love language being like quality time, but it also interacting with being introverted is a very strange mix.
Yeah.
It's like quality time in very small segments.
Mhm.
Like that's the good stuff. Like when we were out in Whistler there, that was 6 days of a lot. I was overwhelmed. Like it
Oh
was
yeah.
just like empty battery the whole time because I couldn't recoup, right?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things though where I could like look around the room though, and like sometimes it like it does just like making eye contact. Are you okay? Like that like, kind of thing. And then my eyes looking back, going like, I'm fucking dying right now, you know. But yeah, like I think having enough trust and development in relationships, um, just knowing each other's love languages and knowing how people are feeling in different scenarios is another expression of love,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
right? Being able to read people, I think, is such an important part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even down to like what this podcast is, like I like like on the front end put in like an amount of work to this thing because like I wanted a thing for us to do together, and like this seemed like a really good idea, and this is how I show my friendship love. It's like, look,
Mm-hmm.
I am doing this thing. I'm doing a task. Look at the task. I've done the thing. This is how I express my affection.
Yeah, it's cool. This is great.
But that,
We're here now. We're here.
that
Episode 4.
look at us go.
Look at us go. I did want to add one thing about understanding love languages is actually understanding how we can actually harm ourselves with our love language. And it's usually our dominant love language when we aren't creating enough self-love for ourselves is actually the reverse of what our main love language is. This is something that kind of came to my attention in the last couple of years, but it's just like, so quality time for me is something that I know how people can show love to me, but what I do to myself to harm myself is isolation. So it's like I'm taking away the thing that I know I can experience love in, and the way that I hurt
Hmm.
myself is that I isolate from it. So say for instance, if your main love language is words of affirmation, sometimes your damage to yourself is telling yourself that you're unworthy, that you're not good enough, or you're just basically not telling yourself that you are loved to begin with.
Yes.
Um uh Acts of service would be like you deny anyone to help you with anything, and you overburden yourself with whatever the task is in life, and you usually get
Hmm.
burnt out and can't handle a lot of things and might run into some emotional distress because of that. Oh yeah.
No, that's me.
I
Just
thought that was
raising
the
their
hand
yeah,
question.
that's
Yeah,
raising
yeah.
their hand.
Yeah,
That's yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Hit me.
It's me. um what was another one? Physical
Gift giving.
touch obviously would be no touch, or denying yourself touch. And then gift
So,
giving is kind of a weird one, being like
Well,
it's
you can gift give to a point where it's like a replacement for the feeling,
hmm.
where
yeah,
it's just like, instead of actually investing in this relationship, I'm just going to keep giving gifts, or asking for gifts in instead of having a conversation, accepting a gift as a way to dismiss that conversation for whatever
Correct.
problematic
yeah.
thing has happened.
Yeah.
So the reason why I brought that up is I think if we're self-reflective enough to maybe see those things are happening, it's a really good measure to realize that you're actually denying yourself the accessibility to the type of love that you want or enjoy.
Hmm.
So it's a mindfulness thing to be aware of.
I mean, to go back to the garden metaphor, like, you have to prune that garden, and you have to know what flowers like live through winter, and you have to know like what flowers bloom in the circumstance in which you have planted them. Hello, Pippin.
Hmm.
Jesus fucking Christ. Um for those just listening to the audio of this, my cat has been so needy this entire time. We're gonna have some
Physical
serious.
touch is off the
Oh,
charts
oh
right
yeah.
now.
Like in
Yeah,
Pippin's world, there's no such thing as not touch.
yeah. Pippin's what I like to say about Pippin is any sort of attention is good attention.
Right.
Like, look at him, he's so cute. Um, but yeah, like, you have to know what plants work in your garden and what plants
Hmm.
don't.
Yeah.
And everybody's garden's a little different. You have to grow it a little differently. You have to give it different amounts of sunlight. It's.
Hmm.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
mean,
I was gonna bring up that meta, like it's very, and to not, I don't know, put pressure
really
on
wish.
yourself to.
I really wish that I found. I wonder if it's in my email somewhere. I have a poem in which that is the actual metaphor. I wrote like a whole poem about what is love, and I wonder if it's in my email somewhere.
Well, I was
But
gonna
that
say
was
really
the
quick,
entire metaphor.
yeah, that like, and to not put pressure on yourself to grow things that aren't meant to grow in your garden too,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I think that goes down to the love languages thing. Like, know where your gaps are, but don't feel like you have to adjust something that is unnatural, right?
Yeah.
Um, Again, words of affirmation is something I would have to work on if I had a partner that needed that, right? Um, but that doesn't mean that it would be on me to become a 100% pure words of affirmation person, because it's not realistic. That
No.
just can't. That's just not who I am, right?
Well, and it's
Um,
exhausting. Like,
it's yeah, it's not realistic. It's just
yeah.
not realistic from every aspect, right? So
That's why we were perfect roommates, Joe.
yeah,
Because we were basically on the same frequency the whole time.
Guys, I think I
Most of
found
the
it.
time. You find it? You find your poem?
I remembered that I emailed it to a friend.
Oh, you shared your poetry?
Yes,
C'est
it's.
quoi?
C'est quoi? All right, you guys want to? I'll cut the first part of it because the first part of it is long and exhausting. Um, but I can read you the second half. Okay. Now, I know this is kind of hard to imagine, but I think it's the closest thing I can come to describe this thing. I think love can be broken down into two ideas. Love is a garden you grow for yourself. You take care to nurture yourself and make yourself a healthy place to grow something that feels good. Then, when it blooms, you pluck those feelings and you give them away. You distribute them amongst whoever you choose: your family, your friends, a lover, the cashier at the grocery store, the homeless, your pets, whoever. Sometimes you get trust, love, acceptance, or validation back, sometimes you don't. But you keep growing and plucking and giving. But love is not just the garden. Love is both the flower and the act of giving it away. It is the thing you grow for yourself and the pieces of the garden you give to others, never expecting something in return, never using the garden as a place to barter or steal. Love is handing the flower to whomever you choose and giving them the choice to take it and give you a piece from their garden or not. Love is a reverent thing. It should be protected and cherished. You take time to cultivate the garden and always keep a piece for yourself, but never the whole garden. Over time, you learn to prune feelings and keep them from dying on the bush. We let go of unrealistic visions of love and shear them from our gardens. We trim distrust and fear from the branches. Because when we learn to give pieces of the garden away, we cultivate the area of the garden that is for us. We know what's important. We know what flowers withstand cold winters and which ones fall from the vine easily. And yeah, love isn't always received well. Some people let their gardens grow full of weeds and thorns and can no longer accept other flowers. But as long as we keep our garden for ourselves and examine it with the expert gaze of a master gardener, we can't give away any more love than we have. We can nurture the flowers we intend to give away and leave the rest for ourselves. Love is growing the flower and then having the courage to give it away.
Hmm. I like that. I like that.
Thanks.
Hmm.
I have cat hair all over me.
That's Pippin's love.
Yeah.
That's Pippin's love
Pippin's
language.
like that.
Yeah.
That poem was for me, right? That was all
Hair
for me,
just
right?
deposit. No, I think that's really relevant and quite beautiful kind of visual metaphor of it, right? Like um I think it's important to really recognize like some people have gardens that aren't looked after,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And that's hard for some people to express stuff. Or they're growing it in a different way that doesn't really grow the same way you grow it, right?
Mhm.
Like and I think these are all aspects of um the human experience in a way. It's
Mhm.
all going to be different and we all need to approach as much challenges as it is, but like as much empathy and understanding when we approach these emotions because it is so close to your heart. And Pippin, I know. I'm sorry.
This is the most needy he's ever been on a stream, guys.
This is
Hardcore.
who Pippin, I know I will build the shrine. I promise. I promise, and more virtual scritches will arrive to you in time.
Yeah, can I get someone to make me a Pippin emote? That would be great.
Yeah. There you go.
Look at him, he's
But
so needy. Alright, get
I
down.
was
I
gonna
love
say
you.
I did like Des the part about pruning what doesn't belong anymore.
Yes.
I think that's a important part, and we like when we talk about that infatuation and love piece, right? Like to prune the things that don't work anymore, right?
Yeah.
And letting go of stuff and connections that um, don't exist. So again, thinking about those friendships that sort of fizzled, it's just like it's sad, but it's not really relevant to hold on anymore, and I only hurt myself by allowing this plant to keep growing
Yeah.
um,
I
without
mean, some
pruning it.
things look like flowers, but they're weeds.
Yeah, yeah. And some plants might be in your garden for necessary reasons, but they also leave your garden for necessary reasons too,
Yeah.
right? And it's healthy for us to realize that it's okay. So this plant, this relationship, this dynamic was here, and now it's gone, and I got lots of learnings from it, and that's great. Um, and I cast it off with love, and
Yeah.
wish them the best.
I think that's also like letting go of love doesn't always have to be heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't always have to be so devastating. Like it's okay to, if you love something, let it go sort of thing. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to love someone from afar, or to love someone and then realize that the relationship has changed, or that you've changed, or that they've changed, and to let that thing go gracefully.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to be happy for the time that you've had, or to be happy for the feelings that that person or thing brought you, but to let it go not when it's not serving you anymore, when it's not
Mm-hmm.
healthy. I think
Yeah.
I don't think it's such an all-encompassing thing that love is the like the sort of relationship type of love is the only thing that matters. And that's, from my poly mindset, in that I experience love in all different kinds of ways, with all different kinds of people in all different kinds of contexts. And like, if one partner whom like, I'll be sad about that, and that's okay to be sad about that, and to be mournful, but it will never wreck my life,
Mm-hmm.
like losing someone, because it's I know that there's more love out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if that love is just me loving me,
Yep.
Yeah.
because no imagined version of anyone can love me as much as the flesh and bone me can love me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and you can always, not that you're gonna look at everything with rose-colored glasses, but you can always remember the best and what that person had brought into your life, right? And remember those good times and have it as this chapter of your story. You
Mhm.
know, this person was in my life for this chunk of time, and that was great, and it came to an end.
Yeah.
Um, all good things, right? All good things. Um,
I've got plenty of exes who I've experienced very deep love, and also been through some really heavy shit with, who I don't talk to anymore because our lives just went in different ways.
mhm,
And I don't feel any sort of negative emotions about that. I'm glad that they're out there living their lives, and
mhm,
having a good life, and I'm happy for them, and I'm happy for the time that we had,
yeah,
because love is, again, it's a thing that you cultivate for yourself, but it's also a thing that you give away freely. And if you
yeah,
give it away with the strings attached of like, I love you, so you must love me forever, or you must have some sort of connection with me forever, then that's ultimately more toxic than it is rewarding.
yeah. And you never know when people might come back to you or things might reemerge or whatever. And I think if you had put that condition on it, then there might be some resentment if they ever
Mhm.
came back to you. But if you treat that dynamic as something that came and went, and I think it's much easier to welcome them back into your life if that does ever change. And I don't just mean that from a romantic perspective, but I mean that from any dynamic that has love as a part of it, right? Again, if any of those friends that I didn't hear from anymore came back, I'd be thrilled,
Yeah.
um, because to be perfectly honest, unless the person comes to me and says we're not friends anymore, I'm okay to maintain that dynamic even if we don't talk on a
Yeah.
regular basis.
Yeah. Well, we're a little over 2 hours. Anybody have any last thoughts? Anybody have some questions from the chat? I really appreciate everybody who's been so active in chat tonight,
Yep.
asking all the good questions and having good input. We always appreciate that.
And cat spotting and doggo spotting too.
My fucking cat. We're gonna have words. Any last thoughts, Kara?
You look contemplative.
Oh, I got distracted about the whole garden metaphor a little bit. I was like, who are the bees in this metaphor? Like, what are the bees do for the garden in this thing? Like, what are the bee? Anyway, sorry, I just like that tangent.
Maybe the bees are the the ways in which other people express their love languages to you.
Yeah, maybe. Hey, yeah.
Mhm.
Because
Sorry,
they
I
help
don't
the
know why my
flowers
brain did
grow,
that,
I
but
don't
right?
know. It's a
well,
poem.
you need like I was like, you need bees, you need wind, you need water. Like these are
You
all
need
things, but I'm
sunlight.
just like, you need sunlight. So it's just like kind of like adjusting it to all that. The, Alex,
They're
Alex,
Wow.
obviously the leaves.
Alex.
ah!
Get out. Get out of here.
Sir.
Brew.
Fucking
What?
fucking grounded.
You can't just jump in here at the end
Banned.
of stream with that.
Holy
Anybody
shit.
got any more useful things about love other than fucking Alex? His stupid jokes. I love you,
Okay,
Alex. It's
let
nice.
me think. Okay, seriously, with love, I think love is something that does not come easily to some people. And if that's the type of person you are, please have patience with yourself and take it little steps at a time. And just chipping away at some of the barriers that have been put in place. And most of the time it was to protect us from things. Um, you just have to give it time, and there's no rush for it. And that's the thing that I think a lot of society does as well, is they want you to accelerate love. They want it to be fast, they want it to be immediate, they want it to be never ending type of thing. um so yeah, if that's the type of person that you are, know that you just got to be patient and work on it slowly and at a rate that you feel comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyone who tells you to speed up, fuck them. that's that's not their journey, that's not their life. So just
Exactly.
just stay true to what feels good for you.
Yeah, I think to to love people is an act of bravery,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also an act of rebellion
Yeah.
in a world that teaches us to be so separated and to be so competitive and to be so divisive. Love is an act
Mm-hmm.
of rebellion, and it's an act of courage.
Yeah. I think for me, I just want to go back to the fact that, and I think I've brought this up before, but that whole internal dialogue of understanding yourself and reflecting on who you are and all that, I think that work is so important, right? When it comes to love, when it comes to being grounded in love, um, doing that work with yourself and understanding who and what you are, can only benefit you. And I think it can help you build those connections, and it can help you not need to rely on those connections totally and completely,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can
Yeah.
build an authentic connection with the person while still being, well, like Steph is saying here, you can still be a whole person yourself. I will say one caveat though: this whole idea that you need to be completely fixed yourself before you can engage in a relationship is no. You don't need to
Yeah.
be completely fixed to be worthy of a relationship. It's
Yeah,
stuff you
there
work on, but
it's
no.
not that thing where it's like you have to know how to love yourself before you can love anybody else. I don't think that's
Yeah, yeah,
true.
yeah. No, no, no. Our capacity for love is not so limited.
Yes.
It's a great title of a book to sell to people, though.
Sure is.
That's what I was looking for, was the eye roll. Thank you, guys.
Alrighty. The corollary to that, Hello Barn, the corollary to that is sometimes it feels like a lack of pursuing love is an act of cowardice or failing to be
Mm,
brave enough.
yeah.
I think self-love is included in that love, and pursuing self-love is also bravery.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to involve another person. Sometimes it can just be you and yourself and your dreams and your life. And that is
Mm-hmm.
100% okay and good.
Yeah. And it's not, and I think I just have to get this. Like, pursuing this self-love thing is not just this like just love yourself. The work that you put into love for another person is long, hard, arduous, takes time. The same timeline exists for yourself, right? It's not always going to be easy, and it's not always going to work, and you got to try different things, and you got to have lots of conversations. um, I just think there's this whole self-care guru crap that is just like, just love yourself and things will be fine, as if it's that easy, right? there's so many aspects of the society in which we live that gets ingrained in us, that tells us that we're worthless, that we're not worthy of it, and it's not realistic to think that we can't push, that we can't be susceptible to that messaging. So I
Mhm.
think if you struggle with self-love, if it's hard for you, if you really have to work at it, that's okay. um, I just, from my experience, that's something I have to work at, and it's
Mhm.
not easy for me. And I can't just words of affirmation myself. I can't just words of
Can't look
affirmation
in the
myself.
mirror and be like, I am loved, I am useful, I am beautiful.
Yep, it does not work for me. It's
No,
a
Well,
process.
it
and to
doesn't
just
even work when my
quickly,
therapist tells me.
oh yeah, there. No, just to add a little tidbit to what Joe's saying too, is everyone's cup gets filled in different ways,
Hmm.
right? So the pursuit of love, either it from being the designated significant other, doesn't necessarily mean that your cup isn't already filled,
Yeah.
right? The value that I have, like the love from my friends, is a way larger source right now in my life than I would say a partner would be.
Hmm.
And that's just the circumstances that I have. I feel there's an understanding among the people who know me, and they realize like I can be okay. Like I'm not a coward because I don't run out into the world having to go find myself a partner,
Yep.
right? Um and I have to have confidence in that. That's how people who love me see me,
Hmm.
right? There's a lot of people in my life who I wouldn't consider, even if I'm related to them or close friends for a long part of my life, you know, there's offhand remarks that you'll hear from people who will just say, "Oh, but why haven't you just tried this or tried that, or have you done online dating or whatever it might be?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've contemplated all of these things, but I'm okay right now."
Hmm.
And if I was to get into a relationship that is more of a love relationship, romantic relationship, um, that will be on my own doing on the time that I feel comfortable for it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's not anyone else's business. And I think you have to have a little bit of confidence in knowing that that's okay and that's not cowardice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Alrighty. Shall we wrap it up, friends? Cool. Anybody got anything going on this week?
Well, we got a lot going on this
Well,
week.
okay. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, on the
We're going
internet.
on a fancy little trip.
On the internet.
On the internet. I will sneak in a stream Thursday night,
Okay.
7 p.m. Mountain Time.
I'm doing a stream on Wednesday, 1:30 Mountain. 1:30 Mountain.
Yeah.
PM. Yeah.
And
We're playing Genshin.
Genshin.
Yeah.
Genshin
Genshin
Impact?
Impact. Yeah. I was able to feed Odago in my last session.
I saw that.
Oh, you must have felt good about that.
Yeah. So the
That's really
code
good.
exists in the game, and they will not let us feed doggos just randomly. So I have a campaign to allow Genshin players to pet and feed the cats and dogs in the game.
Pure
will sign-
villainy.
I will sign that petition any day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm most likely streaming Spooky Tuesday tomorrow with Ciara and Captain
I know,
Gingerbeer.
Zandra.
And I'm pretty sure we're gonna play 7 Days to Die again. So that'll be fun. But then I'm off for the rest of this week and then the rest of next week. Cause I'm going on fucking vacation, y'all. I'm getting the fuck out. I'm tuning the fuck out. I'm logging the fuck off. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna have good. See what I have to deal with?
I saw that. Adorable.
I'm gonna log off. Log off with my cat.
There you go.
I love him dearly. Clearly, he loves me too.
Clearly.
Clearly. But yeah, so yes, I am braving Alberta in February, but it like looking at the weather, it's actually not that different
It's
than Ohio right now.
extremely mild right
This
now.
is
Yeah.
a very mild February.
I
This is the time
got
to come to Alberta.
really
February.
lucky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did. Like this is everyone here, we're all just like, when's winter coming back? Like,
Don't
you guys
say
are-
that. That's how it comes back.
no, we need winter back. We need snow. We cannot go through another drought like we did last year. So snow, come back. Come back, come back, come back.
No.
That's fair.
No
Yes.
thanks.
We need snow.
It was snowing
Oh.
tonight a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I will be in Canada with the Canadians. So if you want to catch me for the next 2 weeks, catch me tomorrow night doing 7 Days to Die, and then 2 weeks from today we'll do the next Less Than 3 NPC. I don't even know what day that is. Hold on, let me look at my calendar. That is the 28th.
Yes.
So
Yep.
that'll probably be the first thing that I do when I come back
Right.
from my little vacation. We don't know.
We don't have topics yet.
We don't have
No.
topics yet. If you I should have had the Discord link prepped, but I don't.
Put it in there.
I know. Hold on, just 2 seconds.
We're on my stream next time, right?
Yes, we are on Joe's channel.
Yes, we do a rotation of Des, Joe, Kara. If you would like to join our Discord and continue the conversation into our in the Less Than 3 NPC channel, you are more than welcome to. We love continuing the conversation in between episodes
Mhm.
since we only do this every other week. Be cool, don't be horny. I have no idea who's in my chat right now, so I have
I'll
to make
kick
that
you
caveat.
out if you do that.
I have to make that caveat. I have no idea who's in here.
There's we have a different channel for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's it. I think we're good. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Thank you everybody for continuing in the chat.
Mhm.
Live well, laugh often. Hail Satan. Good night.
Hail!